Graham Shapley, manager of Cupola Gallery, and I'm here with Jennie McCall and Dan Goode. I hope I've pronounced that right,
You have,
because I've
yeah, that's
suddenly
right.
realised I never asked you how you pronounce it. But would you like to say a little bit about yourselves to introduce yourselves?
Hi, I'm Jenny, and I'm fortunate enough to be exhibiting at Cupola Gallery, which is going to be finishing probably in about 2 weeks' time now. I am an artist in my mid 60s, I have to say, so I've got a bit of history behind me, and I was brought up in the Scottish borders, so I have lots of links with the traditions and folklore of that area. And a lot of my work to date is based on my childhood, being brought up in the borders, and my links to, as I say, stories, fairy tales, and nature. I'm a sculptor. I work primarily in ceramics, though my background was graphic design and illustration. And I think that comes across a lot as a big theme in this present exhibition with Cupola. Dan, over to you.
Hi. I'm Dan Goode. I have many hats. I wear many hats. So I started out studying ceramics. Then I became, by some weird serendipity, a talent scout for an online gallery, which became another online gallery. I started giving talks for free to organizations around the country because we were losing makers. They were struggling to go online. They were struggling to tell their stories and to get their work across to the world. So I started giving talks, and that created relationships with the Crafts Council, the Design Trust, Design Factory, Arts Thread. And through all of that, over the years, I've created my own business, Making Good, where I coach makers and write for them. I also curate events like the London Potters annual exhibition at the Morley Gallery. I'm a judge for the Global Design Graduate Showcase every year, organised by Arts Thread. I curate 2 craft events practically every week of the year in London. I'm the consultant director of Handmade in Britain, and I'm on the board of the New Ashgate Gallery Farnham. And I'm also part of the New Ashgate Gallery Rising Stars programme. I think that's probably enough
Wow.
to get started. So I do quite a lot. I wear a lot of hats. Yeah.
That's why I'm working with you, Dan. All of those things.
Okay, so obviously we're here to sort of talk about Jenny's work and her current exhibition, Roots of Wonder, Thursday's Child, which I've got in the wrong order, but it's kind of I suppose it's all tied together by your book that you've both worked on together, haven't you? So would
Yeah.
you like to give us a little introduction about the book?
Um,
And
well, yeah, the book is really important, Graham. And really, the thoughts around the book started probably as long as 7 to 8 years ago, certainly before we went into lockdown with COVID. And um, and basically, how it started was my long-time photographer, Paul Lapsley, who spends a lot of time in my studio photographing. He said, "Look, you've got all those sketchbooks on your shelves full of lots of wonderful illustrations and notes. Um, have you ever thought about a book and bringing the sketches out of the sketchbooks and doing some sort of a book?" And at that time, I thought, well, maybe just like a portfolio. But I also, at that time, was doing a lot of teaching. And as a teacher in arts, particularly, people ask you constantly, well, where did you get your inspiration from? And that is the big question. It really is. All artists are asked that all the time, writers too, poets. Where do you get your inspiration from? And that really was the little seed that made me link the concept of working on a book primarily, and then an exhibition. And of course, Karen had also asked me if I would like to do a solo show at some time with you guys in the gallery. So that really was the seed of how it started. But from that little seed, it grew into, well, where does inspiration come from? And of course, it always starts in childhood. It starts with your formative years. It starts with the influences around you, your early beginnings, your family, your parents, your siblings, your friends, and of course it branches out into all of those things. The roots of the idea branched out just like that. So the book became a memoir, a short memoir of a passage of time of how your childhood influences your creative thoughts and ideas subliminally. And it's not until later on in life you can really look back and see where those influences have helped to develop your work as an artist or a writer or a poet. That's how I saw it. So that's the beginning, Graham.
Okay, and I think it really comes through because it's a very honest kind of autobiography of your early years.
Yeah.
Um, so I kind of wanted to ask quickly how Dan, you found, because you were the editor of the book, weren't you?
Yeah. Well, I've been part of the process for a number of years. So I've worked with Jennie for about 5 years. Jennie, is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
I think we've worked together. So I met Jennie through Design Nation, through running several sessions with the Scottish and Northern Irish contingent of
That's right.
Design Nation. And so Jennie contacted me because I'm coaching people all the time, and Jennie contacted me and said, "Oh, I think you might be the person I can work with." So we started off this process of working together, just slowly towards what would be this final product. Um, and what's been beautiful is suddenly, so 4 years, really a pretty solid work. And then suddenly this year, it seemed to sort of coalesce, didn't it, Jennie? It sort of suddenly reached a point where words started sort of pouring out.
Yeah,
And what's key for me as a coach, a lot of what I do, and I touched on it earlier, is about story. It's about why people make, which I think is why Jennie and I resonated so much,
yeah,
because it's about making comes from somewhere and making matters to the
yeah,
person that does the making, and their material matters, and their material is, I've always felt like their material is their voice, because why is it ceramic and not textile? Why is it metal, not glass? A material speaks to somebody, and then their voice comes out through that material. So this year it was lovely that Jennie's words started to flow. And in the process of doing the coaching, I do a lot of writing for people as well. So I work with them on why they make. And very often they gift me their words, and I weave it together. The key intention through the book was always that I would take Jennie's writings and it must always sound like Jennie. So, one edits and changes the text and adapts it to make it sort of flow and to have a clear story. So there's nothing that throws the reader out of the story for a moment and makes them question. So it's all about trying to keep that thread running through it, but it should always sound like that person. It should be their words. And so that's what we worked on. We spent months working on it this year towards the publication of the book.
we did, Dan, and I think I have to say that for me the working with you as a mentor was so important, and building up that relationship of trust. There's a huge volume of trust because it's such certainly for me such emotional, intimate study of my life with some disclosure there, which certainly as a younger person I would not have been equipped to fully look at that part of my life forensically as I have done without the guidance of you as a mentor. And that experience that you have done has been invaluable, utterly invaluable. And I would urge anybody who is on a very similar journey to think like this, because you need to be able to, that voice that you're talking about, Dan, share that voice with somebody professional who can weed out the bits that actually you don't need to say that, but you do need to say this honestly, and it's okay, and you will be okay to say it. And so the book part of this exhibition, Graham, has been pivotal to to the whole exhibition. Very, very important, as you can see, because it links all those artworks, some from my past, even 40, 50 years ago, into the big story, which it is. Yet it's still just a small part of my life, but it's a big part of my life too.
I mean,
It is.
complete. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, as every time I look through the book, I spot little things that I pick up in your work that
Oh,
are
do
in the
you?
book, and they're like
Good.
little illustrations. They're not. I mean, I think the story in the book is fascinating, but just looking through it as a visual thing, you pick up all these elements that you've got throughout the exhibition,
Yeah.
and every time I sort of get to show people the original, because you can look through the original book at the gallery. Um, every time I get to show someone that, I see something new that I haven't seen before.
Wonderful.
And because it's not got, because the original book hasn't got the text in it, you really get to focus on
Yes.
these beautifully illustrated pages that
Oh,
have
thank
got
you for saying that.
so much detail and so many things to kind of dig into.
Yeah.
Um, it's a real hard thing to take in one go. So each time, I think you get something new out of it.
Well, that's
Um,
absolutely wonderful. That's exactly that you've just expressed what I really hoped would be the outcome of the combination of the book and the exhibition. And it's an exploration. And I approached the project as an exploration. And of course, the ladder poem, which is halfway through the book, tries to explain that too. How you have to dive very deep, very, very deep, deeper than you've ever dove before. Is dove a word? Um, is it? Uh,
The American
it
version,
is
actually.
now.
Dove is the American version. Dove.
No, oh Dan, I'm so sorry about that. How that happened, I don't know. So you have to dig very, very deep, and it can be really painful and also incredibly surprising because suddenly things click and you realise why you have drawn what you've done, why you have expressed yourself in a certain way. And Graham, one of the things that I know that you've asked is what is the link for me with animals? Because I'm not a wildlife artist. I could be, but I'm not. I love animals and I love for me, it's the spirit and the soul. And just horses, for example, I don't ride, I never have. One of my daughters is passionate about riding. And I marvel at that. And I marvel at the relationship she has with horses, for example. I use that as the best example. But the link for me is that emotion that some animals have. Horses, owls, dogs. I have a beautiful little dog. They have a certain sense that human beings can pick up on. And I would call it empathy. And I feel empathic and I feel that empathy back. And I try to express this in my animals that I do. So I generally don't do robins and hedgehogs. I'm looking at animals that I feel have that spiritual essence that they give back to humans. And of course, the horse has worked with human beings since forever. There's an emotional, intelligent link with these animals. So that's why, Graham, to answer that question that you asked me earlier on. Yesterday, I was talking to Dan about this. I was working on pangolin in porcelain, and it has to be one of the hardest things to make because it's porcelain and it has hundreds of little scales, and it's a beautiful and endangered creature. I make them always in white, and of course they're not white, but they have just that life in their eye, which expresses the animal, the pangolin. So, and the process of making a pangolin is very, very long. But it's why I do what I do. It's part of that relationship with the animal itself. I can see behind you, you've got two there of my horses and a zebra,
Yes.
you know, and that's the link. It is that presence that they have. So does that explain that to you?
It does. I might like to go back a little bit because for people that haven't read the book, I think it's, and the work's phenomenal, but I think you have a really interesting story, and there's an interesting story that goes with your kind of early life. Would you be okay sort of telling people a little bit
Yeah,
about
sure.
that, to give them an introduction of what they might kind of, along with the kind of your influences, you actually find out about your early life and your family secret? Is that okay to talk about?
It's fine to talk about that. Absolutely. It's all there. And like I said earlier, I think it's one of these difficult subjects, which basically we're talking about my father's suicide, um, which happened when I was 10 months old, a baby. And I had an older sister by 20 months, and my mother was pregnant. So my early beginnings were deeply traumatic. Although I was a tiny baby, the days and the weeks and the years afterwards, of course, were full of trauma. And obviously, you cannot relate to that when you're so tiny. It isn't till later on in life that you can reflect on the legacy of that time, which is what I have touched on, because obviously part of a memoir, like any artist's biography or statement, you talk about your beginnings, and so the secret had to come out. It was a big family secret, a suicide, and my father was in the RAF. A suicide at that time was a deeply shameful thing, and the impact on my mother was enormous, and therefore the impact on us was too. And I'd like to bring Dan in on this, because Dan, this is something that that you and I worked on. You know, the legacy of this and how that informed me and my life. And do you want to say a few words about that?
I think, I mean, you are much more eloquent about it than I am because it's your personal experience. But I think what is so interesting about having experienced your world through the coaching sessions, but then actually really experiencing it through your words, was the sense of how you had overcome these early beginnings, how you had sort of through these early beginnings and through this trauma had, what came out of it was a personality, someone with great integrity and with a sense of themselves. And you could be forgiven for thinking, we've had this conversation, we're talking about Jenny's dad and everything. You could think that the exhibition is deeply sad and a place of woe, and it really isn't. The whole exhibition is about the sense of Jenny being a kind of phoenix. She came through that. She got burnt by it and has actually kind of flowered and blossomed through this process.
Like
And so, what's really interesting about that is that the early beginning is hard, but what it created was an artist. It's the artist being kind of fired. It's interesting that Jenny works with ceramics because it's her life has been a sort of firing process.
Yes,
And
yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right.
out of that has come somebody who had a deep sense of themselves, actually, and a deep sense of what they wanted to be and who they wanted to be and what they wanted to do. And bearing in mind, it was really against the odds. When you read the book, you get a sense of how much against the odds and how characters within Jenny's story did not want her, for whatever reason, to, and maybe perhaps through fear, through worry, to be an artist.
Yeah.
That the artist in Jenny won through. And I think that's what's so glorious about the exhibition, is that it's a real testament to someone's spirit.
Oh, thank you, Dan. Thank you. I just want to add on to that something that it kind of links back to the animals a bit, Graham, but it is that instinctual process that artists work through. And that's what I felt as a child. My instinct was to relate to emotional things, which was nature is an emotional thing. Nature tells us so much. And so in those years that I was growing up, surrounded by so much gloom and a lack of support that I could perceive that my mother had in those times. We were from a working class family, and you know, art was not part of it. Creativity really wasn't part of the life when I was young. But my escape from all of that was to follow my instincts, like so many artists do. The desire to create, to write, to draw, to make things out of sticks and pebbles was so strong. And I would do it in secret. If I couldn't do it anywhere else, I would collect things and work in secret in my own little world. And I think that does come across in the book. I hope it does. But the instinctual nature of an artist pushes through from the very, very beginning, even against the odds, even against the family and the collective community. And it's a strength that I think a lot of artists have. A lot of artists have this strength.
Oh, completely. I mean, I think it's the fact that you said you were kind of working on it in secret, I think is really interesting because I think it's that development of your own language, your own kind of personal kind of symbols and things that start to come out of that kind of isolation. Um,
Yeah,
and
well, that kind of leads into the fairy tales and folklore,
yeah.
which
So,
which I didn't understand really the symbolism of good and bad and evil at an intellectual level, but I understood it deeply as a child. It actually was part of my life anyway, so I could relate the fairy tales to my own life.
because I think I mean, it's also really interesting that you use this sort of idea of good and bad because you've got a Selkie,
Yeah,
the horse, in the exhibition, because obviously that has two different meanings depending on what folklore you're kind of
that's right. Well, that's
you're
the
in, whether
thing.
it's good or whether it's an evil sort of.
Well, of course, that's the Scottish and the Irish, the
Yep.
puka and the silky. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that. I love that the folklore, and again going back to the spiritual nature of animals and the that emotional nature of animals and empathy um, appealed to me as a child.
So, kind of now that you've kind of matured as an artist, um, I've been asked by Karen to ask you about how, because you do work in sketchbooks, and not every artist does. Some people like to physically make things, but you working in sketchbooks, how does that feed
Yeah.
into your work?
Oh well, of course, my background always was drawing, and I'm so fortunate that I can draw from a very early age. And in the book, there's one of my earliest drawings at school, which is the Cupists, which is a very lovely story around that, the little Cupids. In the book, where I was drawing the Cupids, copying Raphael, and my art teacher, Mr. Foggy at the time, noticed that I hadn't drawn in the little private parts, and so he sat and drew those in for me. And a lovely link with my art teacher, which was, it's okay, you know, and you can draw, and your drawings are great, and the drawings, because I can draw, it is easy for me. I've never questioned that I can't draw. So my initial thoughts about any new project are to get it down on paper, usually with the brainstorming, drawing first, and then the research and elaborate on my thoughts and ideas and put them in the sketchbook first. Never really appreciating the quality of the sketches. They were simply my mind translating the images and the thoughts into my sketchbook. And it is, it's always my first port of call is the sketchbook, wherever I go. This is part of me. And actually, it does, I think, confuse people, but it's my background being illustration and graphic design means it is a natural tool for me to communicate what I do. And I think, again, that comes across in the exhibition too. It's the drawing part of it.
So how does the book that you made compare to your everyday sketchbooks? I mean it's a beautiful thing and it's fascinating from the fact that it's all done on a piano roll. Um, to do you put so the sketchbooks that your day-to-day sketchbooks that you work in, do you put as much effort into those um, as you do to the one that you had photographed for the book?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. And so the illustrations that are in the book are completely authentic. They have been taken from some of my sketchbooks that go back 30, 40 years. So they are the real deal. Yeah, they've been taken out and put into the book that you have in the gallery. And there are hundreds and hundreds like it. And I do work like that. I work in mixed media. I use collage. I use fabrics in my drawings. So there's a lot of collage in there too. Even some stitch pieces. There are some tiny bones that are stitched into the pages. Then it again, you know, it's about gathering, collecting all those things, putting them together. And some artists might have boxes full of stuff. I've got sketchbooks full of drawings and collage. So they become mini works in themselves, which is it's wonderful to see that actually being published like that. Nothing could be more authentic than that, Graham, than what's inside an artist's sketchbook. That's it. That's
And
really
what's fascinating about that is that the book is the drawing together of all those elements and little bits of Jennie's life.
That's right.
It's exactly the same process. It's exactly the same process that goes into every sketchbook. It's picking and sewing all these little elements that actually made a life, that made an artist.
Yeah.
So the book is an absolute encapsulation of Jennie's process, but in the form of her life, which is really beautiful.
It is, honestly, Dan, it is such a privilege to be able to do something like this. And it's been hard, you know. You've shared that journey with me, you know, the joy and the tears and everything else. But to actually see that published, printed in that form, it's certainly one of the most delightful things I've ever done. I only wish that my mum was here to see it, because my mum, I have to say, you know, obviously was a massive part of my life. And I have dedicated the book to Mum. I talk a lot about my mum because she was there from the beginning, stating the obvious, you know, but it's that being able to write not only about myself, but also about the people who are meaningful in my life. And right to the very end, and when I talk about my beautiful family and the people like yourself, Dan, who's helped me produce this piece of work, it's a little treasure trove of all of those things. All the pieces fitted together in the end. All the right people were there.
I think this is a good point to mention that you have also interviewed a lot of those people. And there's a kind of sound collage that you can actually listen to as you look around the exhibition and on our website. If you go to our exhibitions page and look up Jennie McCall, do you want to tell me very briefly, because we're running out of time here, a little bit about the process that you went through for doing that?
Okay. Well, yes, because of the background, which of my father's suicide and the secrets around that, my mum never talked to my brother and I about this because it actually had to be kept a secret in the family. And it wasn't until when I was a teenager, Mum actually talked to me about the suicide and also mentioned to me that I had to keep it secret too from the rest of the family because of the shame of it. So my brother and my sister and I never really talked about it, Graham. And our father was and I think I express it this way, he was the both the ghost and the elephant in the room. And it wasn't until much, much later, actually, when our mum died, that I broached some of the subject with my sister and my brother about this. And it was quite tricky because my brother really didn't want to talk about this at all. He'd buried a lot of things so deeply. But my sister surprised me by really wanting to go down that route of talking about it. So I recorded several sessions, of which you've got a tiny part of that and you're recording, talking to my brother and my sister. And it was wonderful because it gave both of them the opportunity to look a bit deeper, and all of us talk in a very safe and emotional and quite a loving way, actually, about our past and about our mum. And it closed so many doors. And one of the wonderful things too was talking to my Auntie Madge, who I talk about in the book, who is a link to my mum. She's still alive. So those little threads and links are still there, they still exist. But the importance of talking and about things that can be very painful means that you can close the door once and for all, which is what I've done.
I think that's wonderful. I also realize that we are drawing to the end, but I think that's a really wonderful place to sort of end our little conversation on.
Okay.
Um, I'm sorry about the abrupt ending there. We had a few technical difficulties, and unfortunately, the last few moments where we got to say goodbye to each other got cut short. All I really wanted to say right at the end was a big thank you to Jenny for allowing us to show her work. The exhibition is fantastic, and I really do encourage people to come and see it because it is one not to be missed. I wanted to say thank you to Dan for joining us today and giving his insights into Jenny's work, and a huge thank you to both of them for taking the time just to talk to us and share their thoughts about the exhibition. So, without further ado, I'd just like to say goodbye and to say that the exhibition is on at Cupola Gallery until the 4th of October. You can come see it from 10 till 6, Monday to Saturday. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.